Hey, this is Karen, Coach's Corner Chats, and joining me is Tyler Sherman. Tyler, where are you at and what are you up to?
Yeah, thanks for letting me join. I'm in Atlanta. Been here for quite some time now. Got a number of things going on in the coaching world, and I'm excited to chat with you about it.
I know you had a session tonight. Who were you working with tonight?
Yeah, this evening I was working with my club team, U16 and U14 girls. We compete at Girls Academy League at TopHat.
How long have you been at TopHat, and what do you enjoy most about coaching the club and females?
Yeah, no, yeah, this is my 13th year at Top Hat, so I've been running that for quite a while now. Um, the female journey started at my first Atlanta gig with Atlanta Fire, where a girls team needed to be picked up, and I was coaching a boys team, and I was hand in hand a U15 boys team and a U15 girls team, and then um, 12 months later, an opportunity at Top Hat came up, which is closer to where I was living, and which is an all-female club at the time, and now it's merged with a bigger entity. But yeah, just the relationship aspect of the female game kind of fit well with my coaching philosophy, and hit the ground running. And 13 years later, here I am.
Born and raised in Atlanta, or where were you born at?
Yeah, no. So I'm from upstate New York. My dad worked in law enforcement for a little while and had us moving around, bouncing around when I was younger. Landed in Southeast Georgia, Brunswick, where I went to high school. Georgia Southern University for college, and then made my way up to Atlanta. Yeah.
So, when did the whole soccer experience come? Did you play some in New York, or was that a Southern kind of experience that you got into?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Soccer was always the sport I played growing up. I was a multi-sport athlete probably throughout middle school, which I do encourage still nowadays. But the the big thing is I asked my dad a while ago, I was like, why did soccer stick? And he's like, you didn't stand in one place. You couldn't stand at a baseball mound. You couldn't sit on the bench or on a line for football. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty funny comment as to why soccer was ongoing. Uh, but yeah, and then things started ramping up. Southeast Georgia wasn't very renowned for soccer, so I had to bounce around at different clubs. There was one season where my dad was driving me up to Atlanta two nights a week, but that just logistically didn't make sense after a little while. Having to go down to Jacksonville, Florida, for a little while. Ponte Vedra, which is even further south than Jacksonville, and Savannah, which is just an hour north from where I was. So the club level wasn't the experience of what we see kids deal with today. Um, Maybe just from a guest playing, I was like the guest player for different clubs. If you look at it that way, I didn't really have a home base to where I could compete at the highest level on the regular basis. Um, so I'm kind of jealous of what some of the communities in the nation get nowadays.
What was it that pushed you to? Because when people hear making that, that's a pretty good sacrifice for you to say, "I need to go find better competition." Is that just an internal drive you've always had?
Yeah, I think so. Once I really found that I could develop and really compete at the highest level. And mind you, I started off as the super athletic type. I'm not very tall. I'm super quick. Was super quick rather. Um, and yeah, and it just wasn't. I think the recreational level, it just the as you mentioned, the drive to surpass that and be around other athletes that had the same uh, want to be better or want to compete. That definitely motivated me, and I think there was a certain level, and I think everybody's parents struggle to a certain extent in trying to have that sacrifice on behalf of their child. But um, I went as far as I could with it, and thankfully, I was able to find an opportunity after school, after high school, to play D1 with a small school. So. Um, while I didn't have the best experience at that level, I'm thankful and that I've gotten that experience. And I think or I don't think. I mean, that is that's why I'm where I'm at today. I part of it is wanting to give back what a little bit of what I didn't have, and making sure that the people I work with, the kids that I work with, and even the young men in the college level that I work with have some sort of experience, a better experience than what I have, or be better than I was, or be better, uh, yeah, in that aspect. So that's a kind of like it's a brief summary of where that all comes from.
You've mentioned dad a couple of times in terms of driving you to and from practice and stuff. What's it been like when you look back at even your playing days and even now as a coach? What's it been like having him as it sounds like you said soccer was always something he knew you were going to be into?
Yeah, yeah. So he always pushed my dad was a big soccer guy growing up as well. And this is muddled history. He had a stint at Syracuse on the women's side coaching long ago. Um, and I just think just being surrounded by it, he wanted his sons, my younger brother and I, to be involved with it to the highest level possible. Um, I don't I don't necessarily think we got there just because of where we were at the time, but he was always encouraging. And again, people have their restrictions, and we tried our best. But I look at, I look back and reflect, and again, go back and want to make sure that everybody that I work with has the best opportunity that I can give them. And if I can't give it to them, can I provide whatever resource or help them find those resources to help that drive? So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an ongoing process, and I'm still learning, and I hope that every coach still has that mindset, and um, yeah,
As you look back, as you're moving your way up, is it sounds like you had to go find quality play. Do you stay and play high school in that, or where do you find the high school that you kind of settle in that gets you to the D1 level in college?
yeah. So I did. Yeah. So my biggest scare where I thought it was done is I did my ACL in ninth grade, and 20 years ago, ACL injuries were not 5 6 months recovery time. It was you're done for the entire year. Um, so that really killed it, and it put a stint. And I enjoyed playing high school. Our high school is actually pretty competitive for being where it's at. It wasn't until the playoffs, and I think in Georgia at least, it depending on the region your school falls in, you either have a really super strong region or a very weak playoff, or vice versa. And we fell in the category where our region was it was a sweep region, and then playoffs we were playing Atlanta teams, which made it very difficult. Um, so yeah, I mean, to find the highest level was very difficult. There was no private training. There was no extra equipment. It was go find a patch of grass. We played on a pug goal World Cup, or if it was dribbling around or playing long. It was all the little thing, the old school aspect, which it's hard to encourage with all the again all the resources and all the facilities and all the private trainers, all of that today. But it is as simple as just going outside and finding some enjoyment on your own, just to be 1% better every day.
Can you share kind of perspective for people as to what was the recruiting process like back then? Now we have the huddles and you can send video and there's social media. How did you get your name out there and finally kind of make the decision to go to where you went?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always thought about this, and I've always kind of pondered, like, but I've never really answered the question or asked or had it asked. And it's funny because I don't even have pictures of me playing high school or in college. I mean, there's probably like my headshot, but that's probably the most that I've gotten. Um, yeah, no, the process was interesting. It was a matter of going to the school, and still the tours and all the speak to coaches, that aspect was pretty regular. But there was no send an email. There was no it was all mail based, and being present and spending that time. And being from New York, my family wanted me to go to school in New York. I was pretty comfortable with my community that I created, and which is why I ended up with Georgia Southern. But that being said, had to go and play. You had to go and play in the environment that you were in. It wasn't, all right, send us some film and we'll look at you and maybe you fit in. It was go be better than the next guy that we've already got, or the guy that's coming here next year as well. Um, and then it was just being super mature. And if you weren't top profile, is can you be mature enough to match that level and fit into the environment? So yeah, that's a fun question. Yeah, because I can only imagine. I want to say it's so easy now, but you do have. I have a team full of U16 girls who, not to throw them under the bus, some of them may not want to play college or play the next level. And you can see that by the level of going back into the film and reviewing and clipping moments or sending it via text message to me just for me. Hey, coach, what do you think this moment should have looked like? Or was this a good moment? Is this what we were looking for the team? So little things like that, I could only imagine having that access. And um, who knows what could have happened if that was available.
You mentioned earlier the experience at the college level had maybe some good moments and then not so many good ones. And I thought it was really cool how you kind of said, I'll use that experience to try to make sure I create like the support and what have you that my players have now. What were some of the things that when you think about the college experience, what were some of even the good and the bad that kind of stand out for you?
Yeah, so the best part is getting around a group of guys and just group of your teammates that you see every day, that you're training with every day, that you're creating relationships with every day. That's a big part of my philosophy is hey, can we come together as a group first to then reflect what can be reflected by that onto the field, obviously with training and aspect. But if we can all get along at some aspect from a soccer perspective, we don't have to get along at school. We don't have to get along at out the field. As long as when it's soccer time, then we're all together and we're getting along, then that's a success. And but the challenge is that it was a different coach every year and having to prove myself every year. First 2 years were great. Third year, not so great. Next year, senior year, it is what it is. I was kind of another injury kind of creeped up, and that's where my coaching journey really started taking off because I wanted to get again give back to what again the experience of what I wanted out of college that I didn't get in college, and that all started with a summer camp of where my high school coach, I was like, no way, I don't want to work with the kids, I don't want to do summer camp. He's like, but it pays well. And I was like, I don't think so. I'm gonna just do my summer uh, waiting or service job, and we'll call it wraps. He's like, I really need somebody, come do it. And so did the summer camp, and yeah, and that's where the journey started.
When you look back at that conversation with your high school coach, why do you think he kind of pointed you were the one that he went to initially?
Yeah, I think my class was a smaller class. I think there was 3 or 4 seniors within that class, and I think he built a little bit of a relationship with some of those guys. And I was always playing soccer. I was always finding an opportunity to play when I wasn't working or wasn't doing anything. I think this was his way of trying to keep me involved, keep me safe in a sense, or out of trouble rather. Um, Not that I was a menace by any means, but I think that was just him looking out. And it's funny that even today, I'm still in contact with him. He actually is getting ready to retire, and he's looking for a new coach. But I don't know if I would make it back home in a sense after being in Atlanta for so long and creating the network and the community that I've got here.
When you look back at that first experience with the camp, where you're like, I don't know if I want to work with the kids. When you think about that first experience, what was it? And was that the impetus that you said, oh, you know what? I actually do like this and think it's something I could do?
It's funny because how old was I? I don't know, 18, 19-year-old self after getting that first paycheck was really fun. Um, but the working with the kids and how like creating it just it was a matter of we had soccer, and for me, soccer was fun. Okay. And these kids, at the end of the day, they're being signed up for a summer camp, and that could go one of two ways, right? Depending on the environment, right? But how can we just make that fun for them? How can we make soccer fun? And with all the drills from the 5 year olds, your sharks and minnows or your red light, green light into, the 10-year old doing a 1v1 or 2v2s and or World Cup even like that it just created like, okay, this is very fun. And it was never a I want to do this for a living. It was always just like, okay, this is fun. Maybe again next year. And then push comes to shove, after, middle of college, my club coach from high school is like, hey, we need a coach for our academy team. And then that's when the journey really started. And my first team was a group of U10, U12 boys, seven aside league, and um, it seems so long ago, and I was trying to reflect and think about it as I knew we were coming on this week, and looking back, and it was all tournament based because again, those kids are going in that same environment that I grew up in, um, of not having the highest level possible in our area. So we're having to go to Florida. We're having to come drive to Atlanta. So 4 or 5 hour trips just to, you know, not either be on the competitive imbalance side of a win or a loss.
When you look back at that and think about the long drives and all that, how what was your first experience with parents? I think that's one of the things that comes up, and I've always wanted to ask coaches, especially at that age where you're coming in, you're so hyper focused on kind of the tactics and skill development. What was you're young and all that. What was that experience for you the first time when it came to dealing with some of the parents?
Yeah, some of the parent I think so. It's a good question. So the the philosophy is up, and I believe this wholeheartedly. A philosophy develops every year. I think just as you get a new group, as you just learn on your own, it's books, some webinars, conversations like this. But my first instinct, I had no like I did my what was it? D license at a time, and it was a weekend back when I did it. And that was really just like laws of the game. Here's how you approach a practice. Here's how you approach the players. There was no tactics. There was no X and O's or anything like that. And 22-year-old me, 21-year-old me was like, how do we set up to win? And if we're not winning, how can we just enjoy losing, right? And the parents, and I think the stigma still is there today about like if we're not winning, it's a bad time for the coach. And I had no clue how parents were when I was playing. We hear the chatter from the sidelines, yelling at the ref or yelling at whoever. But yeah, it was a different animal, and where I was at, there was how do you say this loosely? Just like parents who had high expectations of where their money was going versus everybody else of like genuinely want my child just to get a good experience. So um, yeah, it was definitely interesting, and depending on what happened and on a certain weekend and the conversations as a very rookie and green coach um, it was super interesting, and it was always wanting to reach out to my club high school coach, who was the director at the time, to, hey, like, is this normal? Is this how this works? Because I don't know if this could be the long term thing. If this is the conversations I'm having every Sunday evening after a result. So, and mind you, this is 11 and 10-year-old boys soccer.
You mentioned having chats like this and webinars. How important has the, coach education and just, like you just spoke about going and asking and saying, "Hey, is this what I should expect? What can I do differently?" How important has it been the learning curve of always kind of self-reflecting and also putting yourself out there and trying new things?
Yeah, so I going looking back, I've always been one to have to figure it out on my own, and I think that falls on me from not really having the mentorship or even putting myself in a situation to have that relationship. And it wasn't until recently, and really at my B license course in the beginning of the year, where I was exposed up to that, not networking the right way in terms of making sure that I could bounce ideas off somebody, or hey, there's a situation. How did you handle this? So I'm definitely late to that. But back then it was a matter of just you know, run through a brick wall and then problem solve immediately. And I really hate that I approached the coaching world that way. But from an education perspective, I'm glad the internet started to come around when it did, um, because you could simply Google something or YouTube something, which may be more of the introvert approach, which is perfectly okay. We've got kids all the time that are still like that, or just are like that. Um, so yeah, I just think I think back and I wish I had taken a different approach, but the education piece is I think it is important to a certain level, and it obviously depends on what requirements XYZ club, work, job is asking. But I'm glad I did the B. It definitely challenged me. The C license, well, a while ago. Um, I just think if I know that the federation encouraged them to not to take your time and then do it again, but it seems like the curriculum has changed, which could be pros and cons to that. Like you following what U.S. Soccer wants, but if they keep changing it year after year, you know, uh, are you really following what they want versus just creating something for yourself, what based on what your club needs or your philosophy or what have you? So you know, coaches convention is great, hearing from different voices. I've always thought Twitter is a great resource. I know people have their views on that, but just if you get the right feed going, I think it's a great tool. You know, that's how I found you, which is great, in different conversations and different opinions, and you know, the tactical analysis or philosophical opinions, all of the above. It's been good to kind of see people kind of using the different resources that are available now from a coaching perspective to apply that to their day to day.
So there you are, rock and roll with 10 and 11-year-old boys. What's next in Tyler's coaching journey? Do we pick up another team? Like where do we go next?
Yeah, so following that, it was summer camps and just a couple teams of the academy level, and then made my move. I did a year at Jacksonville Armada, thinking that would be a cool opportunity after school. Uh, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, just based on just logistics. It was a fun and cool experience to be part of the semi-pro environment of a team that just started. But I think because it had just started, there was always going to be bumps in the road. Got to play a few games, which is again great experience. But then it was okay, time to get a real job and move to Atlanta. And while I was searching for jobs, I was working with a club with that 15-year-old girls and 15-year-old boys. And that was my first 11-a-side gig. And as you can imagine, kids at each gender at that age, you know, at 5:30, I'm working with a group of hard-headed boys, and then at 7 o'clock, I'm working with a group of teenage girls. So you can only imagine the tongue ties and the headaches that come along with that. And yeah, and that was an interesting season, and working amongst the two, and it was always a fun session when I chose to merge the two, because the boys always wanted to win, but the girls, they always strategically planned on how they were going to make it work, you know, and we'd have different mixed bags of results depending on the night, um, but that was a fun experience as well. I don't recommend it for anybody nowadays, but it was definitely an experience that exposed me to what both realms of soccer could be from a girls and boys perspective.
I've heard Atlanta numerous times in this chat. Can you give us an idea of like what is the soccer culture and kind of the vibe of Atlanta? You talked about when you used to be in Southern Georgia, having to come to Atlanta to get some of that experience and that challenge. What is Atlanta soccer like?
Yeah, so from a club perspective, it's highly competitive, especially at the highest level. It's kind of cutthroat in a sense. We've got, you know, ECNL, we've got Girls Academy, MPL, MLS Next. We've got all the alphabets, right? And you know, from a top hat perspective, we don't play clubs that are 10 minutes away. We've got to go to Florida every other weekend, and ECNL as well from the other clubs. They got to go to Carolinas. They got to go to Tennessee. Um, but you know, I think there's a separate conversation of why there's so many leagues and not being able to play, you know, when you're 15 minutes away. But the there are so many quality players. There are so you asked about the culture of Atlanta, just the culture ever since Atlanta United became a team and established, and especially when they won the MLS Cup, it's been crazy. And now that the World Cup is coming to Atlanta and as a host city, you can start to you see that you know everybody has an interest in it, whether it's to watch Premier Leagues on the weekends or it's to go watch the national team play. I know there's a push to get a women's team here. There are so many aspects for adult leagues as well, and there places are popping up buying land and turf fields and seven-a-side leagues, co-ed leagues, indoor leagues. It's getting pretty crazy from a soccer perspective. It's a lot of exciting things happening.
So as you're starting to now coach 15, 16-year-old girls and boys at the same time, you talk about some of the dynamics with that. Is that kind of where you're stuck, or do you try some other things coaching wise?
Yeah, so when I moved to my club that I'm at now, TopHat, all girls, I had probably two or three teams at the time, and that was an adjustment in itself because obviously I had a brother growing up, had had the boys team, always hung around with the boys, after in college environment. So coming in and working with a group of girls who were probably mid range level, not the best kids in the park, but they were there. They wanted to enjoy. They wanted to learn. And it was, how do I get the best out of the players? When my mindset, I come from an environment where I had a drive, I wanted to compete, but that's not the reality when you're given mid-level talent. And while that's okay, like they need coaching too. And it was always a matter of what can I do as their coach and somebody who has little to no experience on working with teenage girls at this level, not even know how they're wired really. Um, it was okay. What sort of relationship can I create with them so that they're comfortable? Whether it's not even from a soccer perspective, like what's going on a little bit outside their soccer realm so that they're comfortable. And now when they come into the soccer environment, there is no stress. This is I don't have to worry about anything. This is a safe space for me. And now I can go and do exactly what the coach is asking me. I can take all the fun out. I can put all of what I want into it and take all of that I want out of it. And that is something I've ran with for the last 10, 15 years. From just a coaching perspective in every environment that I've been in thus far, specifically in the girls' game, because I do think that's super important as a male uh, role model for these young girls that, you know, do they want to play at the highest level possible or do they just want to compete at the highest level possible, which both of those things are okay. Um, and that's something I preach to the girls every day. And I've been thankful to have the U16 girls since they've been out of the academy, which is an anomaly nowadays to have the same group for 4 years. Um, but that group will run through a brick wall for me, and it makes me so proud. And like we had a couple good results on the weekend that we did not think we were going to get, and so just kind of seeing the reaction and them celebrating and just the camaraderie aspect of that is something that I'll forever cherish and what we've been able to create together.
What's one of the things or some of the things that you enjoy about Top Hat? What is it that is kind of that drew you there? You talked about kind of being at some other clubs and playing and knowing what was it about them that kind of stood out to you? Said, I think this might be a good fit for me.
Yeah, as all of us may have jumped in the private training realm, whether it was just working with a small group or with individuals, I worked with a player who's now playing in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I worked with her pretty often. And the mom was like, "Why don't you make this more efficient for you by moving closer or working closer to your house?" Um, and that girl played for Top Hat, and then one thing led to another, little connection there, and that was really the start of the network of the Atlanta community for me. And then one thing led to another, and now I've, 13 years later, I'm still here. Again, Top Hat's pretty known across the nation for their players we can produce and where they go play, whether it's with their national team or from a college perspective or even the pro level. I think there's a few out there. I've not really been tempted to leave. I've enjoyed. I've constantly kind of proven myself and shown that players develop and are competing and having a good experience. I think at the end of the day, and from there, you meet so many people in the soccer world that it keeps you there. I've got so many relationships with some of these kids that I'll talk to them forever. um, and even at the high school, like even at all these levels, I feel like as a coach, if you're not creating that, you're doing yourself an injustice. Because I think no matter the money, no matter the 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 resume, like that's it's about the people you're working with. And if you can create a good environment, a good experience for them, that relationship's going to go so far.
The other question I was wondering is coaching, is this all Tyler does, or what does Tyler have another job that he's also balancing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I wear, yeah, I joked about it before. I wear a number of different hats on a day to day. I wake up at 7 o'clock. I go and I teach eighth grade social studies. And so I go through that until about 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then I have about a 1 hour period where I can have some peace, and then I'm out to the fields probably every night of the week. And yeah, a couple training sessions in the evening, a couple film reviews for Emory University, which I started that this year, which I've been super excited about. We just competed and won the UAA last weekend, which is super exciting. My role with them is primarily an analytic role. I be there when I can. Obviously, I'm elsewhere. I'm pulled elsewhere, but I provide just video and analysis, opposition scouts, share those slide decks with the team. Here's how we can expose a team. Here's where we can be successful. And then for the actual on-site coaching staff, here's just some recommendations on what we should do to practice for the game on the weekend. And then my two club teams, and then I dabble in the ODP program right now, but that's the fourth hat. So, and then I'm the varsity coach for the high school at the private school I'm at. So, lots of things going on. Things are finally settling down for the winter time. We're going to compete at Disney in a couple of weeks with my U14s, and then we go out to a showcase with the U16s in December, and then high school soccer kicks off in the spring.
So when I hear all of this, uh, first thought was, how does the Emory opportunity come about? Is that again just networking? How does someone know that Tyler is good at breaking down film and sharing his like the things that you noticed and things tactically? How does that conversation and that position come to fruition?
Yeah, so just a B license was a lot of film and a lot of uh, analytic pieces, and I really enjoyed that aspect. It's something I never really, we all watch video, we all watch Huddle, but what are we actually doing with it? And that really brought to light that aspect, and that's something that would be the biggest takeaway from that coaching course. And ever since then, I was more mindful of why I was watching film, what I was looking for. How is this going to benefit from a game perspective, a player perspective, or even setting up a practice perspective. um, but the staff at Emory, also, we competed against each other throughout the last 6 years from a high school level, and I actually sent a couple kids to Emory. So that relationship there with those kids, and then obviously the conversations with the staff, one thing led to another when I changed schools. The opportunity of like, hey, like we could use something like this. Is it something you're interested in? And yeah, and I said, well, you already know I've got a number of different things, but if you don't need me there every day, I can support you where I can, and I'm happy to do so. And so, yeah, and so that opportunity came, and I'm thankful for it. And it's been a great experience, and obviously to create or continue a soccer relationship with those couple kids that I had for 4 years in high school, and now they're on year two at college. It's it's a really cool thing, and it goes back to what I was saying about the relationships you have can create opportunity, or can just create just a relationship that goes a long way in the first at the end of the day.
The other thing I wanted to ask is how has your coaching helped your teaching and your teaching helped your coaching?
Yeah, so teaching is a challenge, especially nowadays. I feel overstimulated by the time I get to practice because the amount of times Mr. Sherman, Mr. Sherman, Mr. Sherman, and then it turns into Coach Tyler, Coach Tyler, Coach Tyler. Uh, it's funny because I was watching a video, I was just scrolling the other day, and it was a teacher like had a number clicker. It's like how many times was my name shouted throughout the day, and I found it funny. I wanted to try it one time, but yeah, no, it's patience. It's making sure that the again, coming from a coaching environment first, that's where I apply that aspect to the teaching, to the classroom setting. And I think the kids are, at least for me, are a little bit more receptive to that, because I'm not the one that's going to give the slap on the wrist. It's not going to be. I'm not going to be I was going to use some language. It was not going to be a stern individual. It's just going to be like the reality is if we're here for a classroom setting, and if you don't want to be here, we can problem solve. Now, I know they send the kids to school to go be in class, but it's literally like, okay, go take a lap, go cool down. And they have to go take a lap around the hall. And then if they're good, they can come back and not be disrupted. Perfect. But I think the kids are appreciative of that rather than because I take a non traditional teacher approach rather than and again, that comes from what I do on the soccer field first. And again, I just feel like the reception of that, especially with students nowadays or just student athletes nowadays, they've got iPads, they've got their computers, they've got their phones, and it's hard to keep them engaged, especially from a social studies perspective. And I don't want to dial too into that, but it was funny because a kid was straight up honest. It's like, I'm not interested in this. And this is so beyond my time. And so it's then got me thinking, I'm like, you're right. How can I keep you more engaged? How can we make this more modernized? So that's the next challenge there. Um, but yeah, I would say to straight answer the question, it would be just like taking the approach from a soccer field. How can we keep things moving along? How can we keep things engaged? And then, when it's over, we go and try again the next day.
With all that you have going on soccer-wise, I always ask coaches this: where do you find, or do you find the opportunity to like turn the soccer brain off? And like, what does Tyler do just to like get away? You even talked about having that hour of like, okay, I'm not gonna hear my name called by anybody. I don't have to think or
Yeah.
answer questions or make decisions. Does Tyler have opportunities to just like get away? What thing? And if so, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a good one. I so one of the biggest challenges for me, and is actually from my one of my instructors. He's like, "Hey, what? Like, you can't keep doing all of these things for this long." And so my goal is to by really this time next year, or really next August, is to dial into one realm. Now, whether that be from a club environment, a college environment, or teaching environment, I don't know what that looks like yet. I've definitely got some ideas in mind. I just don't know what I'm willing to give up. Not necessarily from like I'll miss it perspective, but just like I'm so used to having all these things and created a routine of which I can handle it all. But it's a very good point. As we get older, we just physically can't keep up anymore, and yeah, but as soon as Friday hits, if there's no soccer, like that's really like go grab a bite to eat, like relax. But then first thing in the morning, I'm watching soccer. So, it doesn't really turn off. And I will say, when I do watch Premier League, when I do watch La Liga, Bundesliga, all the leagues, like I do put my fan hat on. The analytic approach does not come out. Um, there's sometimes where I'll look back and like, okay, this was interesting. How did they come up with this, or how did this work out? But not when I'm watching live. It's completely fan hat on, and watching for the enjoyment, watching for the thrill, and the excitement of the game. Um, but I do like to get out, and I've got a new niche of traveling and trying to go find new places and exploring, and so that would be when it really turns off. But then again, I'm always looking for to see what soccer looks like elsewhere. So really, it doesn't ever go away.
The last thing I wanted to ask about, and then we'll shut this thing down, is
Sure.
you've talked about philosophy and relationships and uh, how important has been all of that. It's funny that you talk about that stuff that's not X's and O's. You're not like, hey, we have to play a
Yeah.
4-3-3, or we have to press, or we have to play like Pep, but da 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 that people always throw out. how important is all of that stuff that you've talked about? You talked about the girls being comfortable because of you talked to them and know them beyond the, you know, the painted lines of the soccer field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I wouldn't say I'm behind on a tactical approach, but it is like you're given what you got with the players, and you're not always able to pick and choose. You know, from a college perspective, I guess you can say so. At the top level, maybe you can find the perfect player for your team. Um, but you've got to make do with the players that you got, and you can't force, you can't force a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2 on kids that either literally have no clue what a diamond is in a soccer situation or what. And as long as you have the players, and you have the one, create for them an open-minded approach to the game, and trust, and create that trust, and believe that they can kind of accomplish whatever you're asking, or whatever the team's goals are. That goes a long way. And again, it starts with in creating engaging environments, and meeting them where any player where they're comfortable, letting them speak freely, letting them advocate for themselves, and advocating for each other as well is super important. It's not just my job. I'm a big person on accountability for the smallest details, and that could literally mean, like, you can call it OCD, but having the cones like stacked in the right order, or making sure all the balls are collected at the end of the practice. The small details matter all the time. Um, again, active participation, making sure everybody's involved. I came into a situation recently where somebody was checked out, and it was a matter of having that conversation with them, and trying to find out the why. I'll leave it at that. But it's if if they're not having that, then they're not getting the most out of the environment, whether it's soccer or not. And some of the kids are just there because they need that environment. They may not want to play. It may not be the soccer thing that they enjoy. It just the camaraderie, and they just happen to be very good at soccer, or whatever the case might be. Um, but yeah, the mutual expectations and the responsibilities that come along with it, is something that I hold true to. And um, then that goes back to one of the first things I said, is like, I want them to be better than me when I was their age. And how can I, again, apply the small details in front of them, and then they take away and run with it.
Tyler, this chat has been awesome, and that is a great way to shut this thing down. This is Karen
Yeah.
with Coach's Corner Chats with Tyler Sherman, and I'm out. Peace.
Appreciate you.